Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Pursuing Your SAP Application Strategy and Outcomes. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. We've got a great event lined up for you today. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping information that you need to know about. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's webinar. We want this to be an educational event. We want you to get all your questions answered. If you have questions about today's topic, we encourage you to use the questions box on the left-hand side of your audience console. Right next to the word handouts, you'll find the word questions. Click on that. We'll be doing our best to answer questions throughout the presentation, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's event. We also have a number of resources there in the handouts tab that you should check out. At the end of today's presentation, we'll be awarding a Visa $300 gift card to one lucky attendee on the live event. If you're watching this on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Prize terms and conditions can be found in the handouts tab. That Visa gift card is being awarded by Actual Tech Media. I want to remind everyone that HPE wants to continue the conversation after this event. They encourage you to keep a lookout for communication from HPE representatives, and as part of that, if you agree to engage with a one-on-one meeting, a virtual meeting with your HPE representative to talk about HPE Point Next services, they are offering a $100 DoorDash gift card that will help to offset your time spent during that meeting. So keep an eye out for communication from an HPE representative. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Michael Moore, Managing Consultant for the Point Next Global SAP practice at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Mike, it's great to have you on the event today. Take it away.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're calling from or attending from. My name is Robert Michael Moore with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and today I want to talk about pursuing your SAP application strategy and outcomes. And so we'll proceed. A little bit about myself to kind of give you an idea where I come from. Currently, a managing consultant with HPE's Point Next Global practice, SAP practice. I've got experience with design and implementation of SAP dating back to the 1990s. So I guess that would be like 30 years, almost 30 years of SAP experience. And I've held various roles, some focused and related to SAP at a number of companies. You can see them listed there. And just to round this out, I really kind of focus on business value. I love technology, and I think everybody on the phone has an interest in technology, but I'm always kind of grounded in the fact that technology exists for a business purpose. And once we uncover the business value of a particular technology, that really makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of the reason why I put that bullet in there. And just lastly, again, about technology and business value, one of the things that I kind of follow on the slide, we won't talk about it much in this or at all in this presentation, is some of the distributed ledger technologies that are out there. So if any of you are there attendees and you follow blockchain and Tangle and some of these other distributed ledgers, you'll kind of key on that point of an interest of that I have. Okay. So for topics today, we're going to talk about, kind of the situation today of SAP and you, and I hope to kind of focus in on where you are in SAP journeys, and a lot of the things that I'm going to bring up, I hope really kind of, come close to what you're experiencing and kind of resonate with you. Talk about some SAP project assessments, what sorts of things we can do in this current environment today of SAP, things that produce value, and yet keep you on this path of the latest of SAP solutions. Part of that is talking about lower risk projects, and then part of that is also talking about some incremental things that you can do on your journey to S4 and HANA. I'll get more into detail about this and what this means. And then we'll kind of wrap this up by talking about some of the solutions and services that HPE can offer in this sort of discussion and area. So SAP and you. So I kind of wanted to go back, and if you think, for the past almost 10 years in SAP, think about the discussions and different presentations and webinars that you've attended, and I kind of want to chronologically go through some of these things. If you remember, almost 10 years ago, HANA was introduced, the idea, migrate your SAP applications to it. We had a several ways you could implement it. Sidecar analytic type environments, bring HANA in as a data platform to accelerate data access or reporting or processing. We have Business Warehouse on HANA, Suite on HANA. If you remember some of the play with the big data, so Evora will be a recognizable term. And at that time, the end of support for systems that weren't on HANA was 2020. And then add to that, we have announcements of S4 HANA, so that's a simplified kind of a replacement for ECC, again, based on HANA. You know, in the same vein of BW on HANA, we have a product called BW4, which is a new BW application tier, again, based on HANA. And then the C4 HANA, which is their CRM customer experience. So you see an evolving story around the HANA platform. One notable change, the end of support was changed to 2025 for SAP systems that aren't on HANA yet. So we got a 5-year extension as these new initiatives were added. And then when you add on top of those product type discussions, you have some of the cloud discussions. Move your systems to a cloud provider or HANA Enterprise Cloud or SAP Cloud Platform. You may remember the Project Embrace that SAP announced with, I believe it was Microsoft and Azure. To get customers to do more of their SAP delivery via cloud. And then, you know, also worthy of mention is that SAP acquired quite a few cloud companies, Ariba and Callidus, you see them listed there. So there's, again, a lot of additive items to this SAP strategy discussion, products and where you're going to have them delivered, how you're going to consume them. And then the latest is that we got another extension, pushed back to 2027 or 2030 for non-HANA SAP systems. So that's what we've seen from the SAP side over the past 10 years. And when I think about you, us, everybody that's been in this, it's like, hi, we run SAP, but you look at the list on the left, and it's like, okay, where exactly do we insert ourselves? Should we have inserted ourselves earlier? Can we come in later? Which products do we adopt? How do we consume it? So I'm hoping to kind of bring this out so that you see that there's a bit of empathy there. Try to understand, what does it feel like to be you, as we've gone through the history of all of this in the past 10 years and where you sit and what things might represent of value to you in an SAP strategy. And what we find is that, obviously we're all unique. We all have our own planning and our own business goals. And one of the things that I think about when I look at that list on the left of all those things, gosh, it seems like we have we need to jump from where we are to a new place. And sometimes we could characterize that as jumping from A to Z. And, can we make that large of a jump? Is there some incremental things that we can do? Again, still heading towards that spot of Z, but could we jump to G or D or any of these incremental steps that get us in that space? Because again, empathizing with you, the customer, we're all unique. We have different planning and business goals and what we're able to accomplish. So what are some of those things that we might do, getting us to Z, but incrementally there? So when we think about that, okay, so what sort of projects and assessments do we make based upon that information that everybody's different? Well, I've got 3 examples here that I want to kind of go through, and you may read some of these and say, yeah, that's us, or that's a bit of us. You may cross a couple of these, but you may be in the position of, hey, look, I just want to keep the lights on right now. We've got other projects going on. We've got other more pressing business needs, but we really need our SAP environment to stay up and running. We don't have an immediate huge S4 project, but maybe we've got some infrastructure that's old and needs to be replaced. Or maybe we know that we want to keep things on premises, but we want to pay for it and we want to consume it like a cloud experience. Maybe some of those things, reduce our footprint or improve the performance or maintain what we've got. A lot of customers can sit in this space. Now, along with that, you might have some customers that are more of, hey, we're ready to make a big change or two. We don't have that final project that moved to S4, but again, you can see here listed here, maybe we're a Unix customer and we really need to start considering a migration to Linux. Maybe we aren't ready to bring that new application, SAP application tier in S4, but we could move forward our existing SAP application tier on top of HANA, which would be Suite on HANA. And I also mentioned BW on HANA. Or maybe you have scenarios where We want to move, hey, we want to get out of the data center business. We want to move all of our applications to the cloud. Maybe we don't move some, but we move the business to a new application that's on the cloud. So you're replacing applications that are on premises with applications that are on the cloud. These are some of the big change or two type scenarios that fit some of the customers that we run into. And then finally on the right, I call this the whole new world. These are the set of customers that they're ready to adopt the latest of SAP. Maybe they decide, they've found that they've worked with a system integrator, they've done their business process blueprinting, they know based upon where they are today, they can go as a brownfield, or maybe they've decided they need to start all over and go greenfield. But the point of this is that we've got a set of customers out there that are ready to go to that latest thing. They can get to Z today. And we can certainly work with those customers as well, and all of these. And so the whole idea behind this is to understand that we're all unique and we're in different phases. We're all moving towards the right, but depending on where we are, we may land in one of these columns. And the other thing I would say is, and this is obvious, some of the things that you'll see on the left-hand side could migrate and find themselves on the right-hand side. So what do you mean by that? Well, any of the ones on the right might include an infrastructure refresh. Any of the things on the right might include a reduced system footprint, or as you're moving to the whole new world, it might involve a Unix to Linux migration. That sort of message there is what that means. Now for this presentation, I'm going to focus on the two left ones mostly. Again, we've got the right and we can talk about that, but I really want to spend some time and speak to the customer that's in this space right here. Not ready to go to Z yet, but wants to know what are some things that we can do right now that will improve our situation. And you might ask, well, why do that? Well, here's a recent ASUG and DSAG survey. Those are the user groups for both Americas and Germany. And you can see that the largest adoption is still SAP ERP with enterprise central component. So all of that existing SAP that's running out there, I like to say SAP with any DB, okay, so it's SAP with not HANA yet, it's SAP with Oracle database or SQL database or DB2. We see SAP ASE as well out there. There's a lot of those customers out there. And so and we're seeing it in this survey. And so this is the reason why I want to spend a time and focus on those first two customer areas. What are some things that we can do right now to keep us on that path, but still, again, makes use and extends the life of that, again, that top bar, that ECC product group. All right, so let's talk a little bit about lower risk projects. And this is a repeat of some of the examples that I mentioned earlier. Lower risk, right? We're not changing too many things. We're really on the mission of improving things. And so to give you a little bit more detail, these are some small changes, but again, worthy outcomes. Consider the age of the infrastructure that runs your SAP today. Because you may be looking at S/4HANA and those, further end, outcomes, but is the infrastructure that you're running today, is that going to need refreshing? You're going to have some support issues with some of that stuff running today, or you might have some cost savings that you could implement today on that kit before you finally go to S/4HANA. And I bring this up because, and I follow, you'll see the asterisk down there, the SAP two-tier SD benchmarks. I follow those. It's phenomenal, the amount of capacity and performance that you can get out of a 2 and 4 socket server. So there's real opportunity, say today you're running on 4 socket or 8 socket servers, or you have a lot of servers that are running your SAP environment. There's a lot of opportunity today to come in, look at that workload and reduce that footprint dramatically, lower the costs of delivering SAP today, which is a good worthy outcome, for a small change. I also mentioned more virtualization and hyperconverged solutions. So this is an opportunity, if you haven't virtualized a lot of your SAP, this is an opportunity to do so. If you're looking at hyperconverged solutions, so you want all those rack servers and virtualized storage controllers and kind of have a horizontal infrastructure play across your data center and carve out of it workload space for SAP environments, I highly recommend folks look at hyperconverged. The fact that all of the performance of those 2 and 4 socket servers have increased so dramatically, it makes room for abstraction of technologies like hyperconverged. And so finally on this slide, it presents an opportunity. Again, I keep mentioning reducing your footprint, really reducing the cost of SAP applications and how you're delivering them today, and then giving your end users and business a better experience, an improved experience, without having to do a whole lot, not too many changes, and you're returning to the business something of value. All right, the next thing is, your journey to S4, what are some incremental steps that we can take? We can't get to that final thing, but let's do some substantive things now that get us better there. And this is again, a rehash of a slide that was earlier, but let's go into a little more detail. And I apologize for the wordy slide, but these are good points to get across. I think I've mentioned this, depending upon your starting point, going to S4 might include a number of changes, quite a few exactly, and we can go through some of them. But part of that journey that you might find yourself in is, can we phase in some of these changes? We know that, the outcome's going to look like this, and we don't look anything like that today. Are there things that we can phase in, not all at once, but get us to looking more like that final outcome, so that when we do finally do the transformation, we're not changing a whole bunch of things. So in light of that, perform all software upgrades. So if you've got some enhancement packs, some operating systems that might need to be upgraded, database versions. And I bring this up because, again, remember that 27 to 2030 date. Let's make sure your software stack is all upgraded to make full use of that timeline, so that you have all the time available to you to do more planning for this S4 transformation. If you don't have HANA in your environment, I recommend bringing it as a reporting and an analytics scenario, like a BW or sidecar. That way your group, your organization gets familiarity with HANA, the operation of it, the product, the function and features, but you're bringing it in a use case that isn't quite the criticality of a transactional system. It's still critical, but a reporting system is not as critical as a transactional system. So that's one way you could bring HANA in and start getting your feet wet. I mentioned earlier about Unix to Linux. This kind of goes along that lines. If you're running Unix on a RISC platform and you know that the majority of HANA is x86 and only on Linux, it might be a good opportunity to go through and consider some RISC to x86 migrations. That's kind of a big project, but again, it's a substantial step getting you there to that final place. I mentioned a suite on HANA, consider that. So this is for the customer, and I mentioned it before. We don't feel comfortable in bringing in a whole new application tier right now that would represent too many changes to our business process and functions. But if we could bring forward our current application tier and land it on top of HANA, that gets us closer, correct? Okay, so that's what that one is. And then finally, just get an idea to simplify some of your environment before that final transformation. So maybe you have many SAP systems out there, and you have an opportunity to consolidate what we call system IDs, SIDs. So go through and cleanse and say, okay, can we move these business units together and operate them on the same SAP environment? That would be a good thing, because then when you do that final push to S4, you have fewer systems in scope that you're having to deal with. It's reducing your effort at that later change. And then I talked about moving applications to the cloud or adopting applications in the cloud. And so this is an area where, let's say there are some business functions like employee self-service or human capital management, some of these other areas and modules that you might be running within SAP in your current system, that you could say, we could replace that function with a cloud application like a SuccessFactors or any of the others that are out there. And then that reduces the workload and relative use of our existing SAP environment, which again makes things smaller and easier to move to that final environment. So these are some ideas of those incremental steps. And there's possibly more. This is just getting that discussion going with the customer. So I want to talk about HPE solutions and services. So we know HPE offers all the infrastructure you'd need. I've listed a lot of it here. I mentioned Hyperconverged and Rack and Blade, of course, Superdome, our storage and our networking. the portfolio that HPE has from an infrastructure standpoint, we really lack nothing. Anything that you would need to run your SAP environment, no matter what size you are or how you want to consume it, we've got the infrastructure answers for that. But I want to stop because this is obviously a point next presentation. I want to talk a little bit more about the services that are involved. And maybe you're not aware, and we're kind of get this message out. We offer services in all these different phases, and I like to kind of categorize them in 3 areas: plan, build, and run. There are things that you'll do in the planning phase, and then that'll direct what you do in the build, and then there are things that you'll do on a day 2 ongoing basis in the run, then the run area. But here's some of the areas: assessments, how and where to consume. This talks about CapEx and OpEx. I'll go a little bit in detail about that. We can offer project management. Not to go through every bullet point, but you can see them there. In the build, you see the traditional rack and stack and software installation, but also know that we can help you with that workload and data migration from the old environment to the new, and help you with work on integration of interfaces and interfaces between your other systems back into the new environment. Ultimate goal to achieve go live. Now in the run area, obviously, we talk about infrastructure support. We do offer basis management. We've got some security features. I'm going to touch a little bit more later about performance management, especially in light of the virus situation today, systems being used and heavily used, but also in light of all the different changes that are continuing to happen. I want to talk a little bit about performance at the end of this. So let's kind of dive in and talk, what sorts of services would we work with the customer on keeping the lights on and not changing too many things. Obviously, coming in and understanding the environment is key. Looking for those low-hanging fruit. What are some areas that we can improve things, big bang for buck, right? Improve things without too much change, without too much risk. Evaluate things like physical to virtual. I talked about evaluate CapEx and OpEx. This is where our group, the GreenLake offering, comes in. So this can give you, if you're not ready to, move everything to the cloud, but you want to have that cloud experience of, spinning up systems, and not only from a technology standpoint, but paying for it, consuming it the way you pay for things in the cloud. GreenLake offers that solution for you, and you don't have to move things. You can have things stay on premises, which may be your preference. I talk a little bit about performance assessment. So this is coming in and saying, let's get a baseline of how things are running today, because after we change something, we want to measure it again, and we want to be able to speak back to the business, say, look, all of our effort and what we did here, this is the outcome. This is what we returned to you. So you can see some of in the build area, I mentioned pilot, POC. I won't belabor these points, but again, all of those areas. And then in the run, support for your infrastructure, and then I touch on performance management. Let's go to the next one. So what sort of services would we have in a big change or two? The big one up there, right mix assessment. This is a specialty that another division of HPE called Cloud Technology Partners helps with. This group can come in and look at your portfolio of applications and give you suggestions based upon your ideas and feedback and strategy of this application could move to the cloud, this application could be replaced by a cloud application that's available. So this goes back to that step of reducing my footprint that I have today by moving workloads and moving the business to new applications that are being delivered elsewhere. This is where CTP can come in and help. Part of that, I mentioned the risk to Unix. What would be our total cost of ownership and return on investment of going from risk to x86? We certainly can help with that. And then I kind of go into detail a little bit about more HANA planning, bringing HANA in some scenarios that are more digestible at this point. Some of the stuff is repeated that you see from the previous slide. And then some of the things in the build, obviously you'd see these and you'd expect to see those even in this environment. We're doing some of the same things, and also in the run. Now, I don't want to ignore a whole new world. We haven't talked about it much. But again, if you're a company and you're saying, no, we're ready to implement these latest SAP products, can you help us? Yes, absolutely. Start off with coordinating with your systems integrator, those folks that are already working with you. I talk about pre-conversion studies. So this is that, figuring out, looking at business processes and the way you transact business today, How is that done in the new application tier of S4, and what sorts of things are we going to need to do to reconcile the two so that we, again, function as a business on the new software stack? What sorts of things will be replaced? What sorts of changes will we need to do on the business side? And HPE also offers, and it's not in this slide, but we also offer services to help the business with change management. Because again, a lot of these things, this will be new. If folks are getting new screens, folks are establishing new relationships with new areas of the business. If a transaction process has changed, and we can bring services in to help navigate and help business accept all these, the management, the change management. I mentioned brown, green, and blue as methods. These are all kind of, you recognize these terms as in an S4HANA transformation. These are the things that you always see. A kind of a repeat in the build, obviously, changing things, installing things, making sure the new system integrates with the existing systems that are already there. And then the run is kind of a repeat of the other things. But I want to talk a little bit about performance services, where I kind of, a little bit more detail. We've actually seen this from customers, the impact of COVID-19. Some verticals, some areas of business are seeing a big increase of utilization. We've had customers come to us and say, we're seeing this system heavily utilized, much more activity than it has in the past, and we're seeing some performance bottlenecks. Can you come in and help us figure this out and rectify it? Absolutely. The other aspect of this is that some areas of your business transactions may be impacted and impeded. I think of things like supply chain, but I also think of anything that's you're working with customers through different channels or partners through different channels, because some areas have been impacted and slowed down due to the virus. And what that does is, when you move one process that's used to going through one path of execution, and you have to change that to a different path, some of those systems involved in the new path are seeing stress and workload that they haven't seen before. And so this is another area where we can come in and say, yep, where you changed a transaction or changed an operation due to the impact of COVID-19, we're seeing this area of your environment seeing more workload than it ever did before. And so how can we fix that? But then ongoing, and again, we're going to get past this virus, we're going to get back to everything the way it was, but there's always change in your environment. There's always implementing new things and new methods and processes. And so any of those areas where you're thinking about a new project or implementing something different, again, it's always good to get a snapshot of the performance of the system today, and then as you're making that change, take additional snapshots and get a final snapshot of, okay, here's the improved performance in all these different areas where the project made sense and how we've delivered a better outcome to the business. I have at the bottom where I measure, I say measure, change, measure, repeat. So I look at these performance services as something that should be part of any project, really, because that's what you're trying to prove. I mean, you want the process to work, but you're also trying to guarantee that that business end user experience. Some of these mentions, can't we just solve this with new hardware? Sometimes you can if the bottleneck is in hardware, but a lot of times the bottleneck is in that application. There's a configuration, there's something that needs to be tweaked, and so you need a very holistic view of it, and that's what we do. We look at it from end to end, from the application, and it can be non-SAP applications as well, but from the application database all the way down to the infrastructure layer. And most importantly, we're not limited to HPE hardware. Wherever we can put a measuring tool, we can get information back. And even if we can't put some of our tools out there, if we put tools in the pieces that surround it, we can point to the area. Okay, this is the area where it's slowing down, and then it points our investigation further in that area. So it's very valuable. And we've broken this up into kind of two areas: a curative, which is, okay, we've got a problem now, and we're seeing peak performance, we're seeing issues, please come in and help us fix this as soon as possible. And we have a set of services that can do that, kind of like an emergency response, if you will. We have a very light touch reporting offering, which comes in, think of this as everyone on the phone, I'm sure, is familiar with an early watch alert. An early watch is a good report. It goes within the application tier and what tables you're accessing and the transactions you're using, but it kind of stops at the SAP, and anything below it, you're not really seeing what's going on in the database. Are there some issues in the database? Are there issues in the hardware? It's those pieces are missing. That's where this report comes in. It does exactly what Early Watch Alert does, but then it goes even further down. And it's a very light touch. It's here, we've produced this for your review. If you wanted someone to, one of our team to come in and analyze that and provide suggestion, that takes into the next set of services where we do the report, we do the analysis, and then we're able to offer, again, some preventative type measures. So I've even been working with customers, cloud companies, I won't mention them by name, but they're going through some changes and they're delivering some changes in their technology stack, and they're delivering to the customer, and they want to make sure that that user experience is carried forward after the changes. These are where some of these preventative services come in, always monitoring that user experience. So that about wraps up what I talked about today. I appreciate everyone joining. If you want more information about this and schedule a discussion, please contact your account team within HPE. They'd be happy to help you. And in lieu of that, I've got my email down, very simple, more@hpe.com. Just send me an email. I'd love to talk with you about your particular situation, you and what you're facing, and work with our team inside HPE to get something together and have some discussions with you. And I think at that, I'm going to hand it back to David for our questions and answers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation there, Mike. We do have a lot of questions coming in from the audience. Before we jump into those, I want to remind everyone that HPE wants to continue the conversation after this event. They encourage you to keep a lookout for communication from HPE representatives. And as part of that, if you agree to engage with a one-on-one meeting, a virtual meeting with your HPE representative to talk about HPE Point Next services, they are offering a $100 DoorDash gift card that will help to offset your time spent during that meeting. So keep an eye out for communication from an HPE representative. And now let's jump into the first question from the audience. That question I see here looks like a good one. This is, do you think SAP will again extend the support timeline for SAP systems that are not HANA? Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great audience too. Yeah, so obviously don't know. That's something you can't really predict. But I will say this. If a few years ago, if you had said, hey, I don't think that they're going to be able to make the 2025 date, you might have had some folks saying, oh, no, they're not going to extend it, and they extended it. I think what you have to do, and this is what I've done, I've monitored and through different data sources and estimated, okay, how many SAP customers have yet to make that move, and then I divide that by how much time is left before the end of service. The last time I did that, and this is when I was starting to tell folks, I said, guys, I don't know that 2025 is going to stay. And the reason why I said that is after I did my calculation, I came up with about 25 go lives per day, every day around the world. So that means for all the remaining SAP systems that needed to move to HANA, there would need to be 25 go lives 7 days a week, every day. And if you look at the way SAP interconnects all different businesses around the world, 25 separate go lives could be disruptive. And not only that, I don't know that we have enough delivery people and consultants to be able to handle that kind of workload. So that's how I look at that. I can't say yes, I can't say no. It wouldn't surprise me, depending upon how the adoption goes, that they push it back further or come up with some other solution. But that's a great question. That's something I always think about.
Great insight. Let's see, next question they're asking, do other SAP hardware and services partners share the views that you presented today? I'm not sure if you can answer that, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great, well, hey, that's an excellent point. I think so, and I tell you why. I look at marketing material and I attend webinars from competitors and cloud providers and other sources, and I see them talking about this. I see them saying, hey, like from a cloud provider perspective, S4, yes, we're going to S4, we're going to HANA and using all these new tools, but just bring your SAP as it is to our cloud platform today. I see that a lot. I see that from, I could name them, but think of the big three. Just bring it as is. That makes me think that they're looking at this in a very pragmatic fashion. undergo the changes that you can stomach today, that you can digest today, that get you further along that path. The other thing that I see is, yeah, anecdotally, if you go out to the sales and distribution benchmark, folks on this call and the attendees here, I know you're aware of that. Do a Google search, SAP SD benchmark, and go to that link. These are the benchmarks that measure the capacity of servers running ECC, running the the older version of SAP with databases like SQL and DB2 and others. So this is the SAP that's not HANA yet, okay? If you look at that site, you'll notice that a lot of companies continue to publish, and this is not without expense. So it tells me that these companies are looking at the market out there. They see that this, this group of customers, just keep the lights on and help improve things, or I can make a few big changes. That's a big chunk of the market because they're still doing these benchmarks to relate to the partner community and customers that look at the capacity and performance you can get on the latest servers of the SAP that you run today. So those two kind of things make me think that, yeah, that it's pretty well thought of in our industry that this is a this is a viable scenario.
Nice. And then next question, are there any drawbacks to implementing Suite on HANA as an incremental step before S4 HANA?
Yeah, that's, you know what, I've gotten that question before. Other than the fact that it's kind of like two big steps, I mean, Suite on HANA is a big step in that you're bringing another database in. Not too many changes in the application tier. That's the whole idea. S4 represents many more changes in the application tier. The only thing that I can think of, and this is something to think about. Suite and those applications were written at a time when data was kept in a database on disk, okay? That has its whole sort of economic scale, data being kept on disk. So if you have an application tier that generates a lot of data, a lot of indexes, a lot of tables that are used for working tables to speed up the performance of the application, which Suite was designed to do. If you take that application that's generating, I would say, extraneous data, and it's running on a disk-based database, that's one thing to think about. Okay, we've got to increase disk space. But when you take that and you move that data onto memory, it changes the economics of things. So that's the one thing that I think about sometimes. And I've heard this from some of the one of the cloud companies I talked to recently. Their application was written to run with an Oracle database. They described it as consuming so much data and costing so much to deliver. Now, moving that application to HANA, the amount of disk space that's required is tremendously more. It's multiple more, and increases their costs of delivering that, to the customer. So I guess what I'm saying is it might be a drawback if you take an older application tier that was designed with the economics of keeping data on disk, and you place that on a system that's keeping the data in memory, and that application keeps generating data the way it always has. Well, then you may be in a scenario where you're building and paying for bigger systems than you really need to be. And that's the only thing. I think it's a good thing as a big step to go forward, but I wouldn't hang around in that space. That's probably my best advice on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how viable is hyperconvergence for SAP workloads?
Yeah, extremely viable. I say this with experience. Over 10 years ago, let's see, how long ago was that? Yeah, I mean, it was probably 2005, 2006. I evaluated a project, and I'm always working in SAP, but many years ago, I evaluated a product called Left Hand Networks. And it was this product that said, hey, take a bunch of these rack servers, install a hypervisor on it, and then install a virtual storage controller that will present all of the disks that are in all the different rack servers as a storage resource for the applications and databases. Sounds very familiar. Okay, so that was 2000, I want to say it was like 2005, 2006. And that's very similar, it's exactly what Hyperconverged is. So if you fast forward to today and you say, okay, what was the hardware like in 2005, 2006, and what is the hardware capacity like today? And as an example, again, I encourage people, go out to the SAP Sales and Distribution benchmark, go back to 2005 and 2006, look at what a 2-socket or 4-socket did as far as SAPs and concurrent users, and now compare that to what a 2-socket can do today. And what you see is an immense increase of performance. Now, is all of that performance and capacity going to be eaten up by your workload? Well, yeah, I mean, certainly since 2005, 2006, you've become more active. But I don't think that your business activity has grown as quickly as capacity has. And so I think we've got, I know, based on benchmarking, we've got excess capacity that we can consume with these abstraction layers like virtual storage controllers, and the performance for the business is fine. So the other thing I would bring up is like when you click on, I want to run SAP, on the cloud, and you click on any of the cloud providers and you say, build me this SAP instance. Where do you think that's landing? It's landing on their in-house hyperconverged. That's the first place that's going to be attempted to place that workload to see if it'll run okay. And it does. In many, many cases, it does. So I would say, yeah, very viable to be looking at hyperconverged. And especially as you're, again, looking at these incremental things that you could do today to reduce your cost, make your data center footprint smaller, make things easier to manage, I would definitely look at hyperconverged for existing SAP workloads out there. Great question.
Okay, great advice. Yeah. Next question regarding your performance services. Can those services be used for cloud delivered applications?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this kind of follows on that discussion. Yeah, anywhere we can work with the cloud vendor that has the application to place, it's a agent, place our measuring tool out there so that we can get measurements based upon response time. We even have clients, again, like I mentioned, cloud providers with applications that are using our services. And yeah, definitely. So if you've got an application that's running in the cloud, we can measure the performance of it. We just work with your cloud provider. And that's a great question because, I think folks on this call, you've got a lot of experience, been around this business for a long time. We have gone from applications and user access to a handful of data centers and all of the workload of the application and transaction passing within maybe one data center, maybe two. And then you look at business applications today with our interfaces, maybe coming from a cloud provider, touching a database that's sitting on premises or maybe at another cloud site. The distribution of process today is wide. I mean, I bring that up because everything goes back to response time and user experience. So again, as you're taking these transactions in your business process and you're a very hybrid approach and you're pulling bits of information and interface and processing in different areas, not just one or two data centers, it's critical that we can land a performance service that monitors everything, and we can kind of stitch the whole picture together for you. That's a great question. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be ideal. A single performance service that can monitor everything. I like the idea of that. All right. Well, it looks like we're running out of time for our live Q&A session here, but it's been really great having you on the event today. Thank you so much for your presentation, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time today. Look forward to speaking with you. Thank you.
All right. Excellent presentation. Thank you again so much, Mike, and thank you to HPE for supporting today's event. Before we go, I want to award the winner of our Visa $300 gift card. This is going to Jeremy Campbell from Missouri. Congratulations, Jeremy Campbell from Missouri. We'll reach out to you from Actual Tech Media to deliver that gift card. Thank you, everyone who joined us on today's webinar. It was a really, really informative event, especially if you're doing anything around SAP. Again, pursuing your SAP application strategy and outcomes, brought to you by HPE. So thank you to HPE. Thank you to our audience. Hope that you learned a lot, and we'll see you on the next event. Bye-bye.